Happy Wednesday, my friends, and thanks for joining me again this week. This is week 5 of our series, which I can't even believe we're 5 weeks into the new year already. And today I want to talk about something that many people experience after loss, especially losses that aren't tied specifically to death. Things like maybe infertility, a job loss, chronic illness, a faith shift, the loss of safety or identity or belonging for any reason. And if you've lived through one of these types of experiences, you've probably heard phrases like, well, at least nobody died. So be grateful that ... Everything happens for a reason. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So, yeah. Most people don't say things like this to be cruel. They say them because they don't know what to do with grief that doesn't fit a familiar category. We live in this culture, in this society that's more comfortable with grief when there's a clear ending, a date to say, now we can be sad, like a funeral, a socially approved reason to be sad. And non-death losses don't really offer that. There's no service. There's no ritual. There's no obvious moment when others say, yep, there it is. This matters. And so it tends to get minimized. I've experienced this personally. As someone with deep faith and a strong connection to my faith community, having several of my children choose to leave that community caused real grief for me. Not because I stopped loving them, and not because they're not in my life anymore, because they are, and not because I feared for their worth or their goodness, but because something meaningful, something that we shared, changed. And in that grief, I sometimes heard things like, hey, at least nobody died. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Or there's still hope as long as they're alive, which is really interesting because in my faith tradition, hope doesn't end at death. So what those comments really did wasn't offer comfort. They minimized the loss that I was grieving, that I was struggling inside of. And along with that minimization often came for me guilt, shame, a feeling like I was being judged, and that quiet implication that I shouldn't feel sad or that my sadness meant that I lacked faith. Yet none of that was helpful because the grief that I was holding wasn't imaginary and it wasn't spiritual failure. It was a grief of relationship, expectations having changed, identity being challenged. And here's the truth I really want to name is that invalidated grief doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. When grief isn't acknowledged, it doesn't dissolve. It hides. And then it shows up later as anxiety, shame, numbness, anger, or self-doubt. And it whispers things like, you're being too sensitive. You shouldn't feel this way. Other people, they have it worse than you. And slowly, that grief becomes something you feel like you have to carry alone. But grief does not need permission for anybody else to exist in our hearts. When people around us can't or won't name that loss and help us with it, it whispers things like, hey, I think you're being too sensitive. You shouldn't feel this way. Other people definitely have it worse than you. And slowly that grief becomes something you feel like you have to carry alone. Grief does not need permission from anyone else to exist in our heart. But when the people around us can't or won't name our loss, the pain isn't just the loss itself. It's the loneliness layered on top of it. If you've ever been hurt by minimizing comments, there is nothing wrong with you. Your grief wasn't too small. It wasn't too dramatic. It wasn't selfish. It was real, and it deserved care. Part of healing, especially with non-death loss, is learning to trust your own knowing, to say quietly or loudly, this matters. I was changed by this. And I am allowed to grieve what didn't die, but still ended. Now, if this resonates with you, I just want you to know you're not alone. I'm right here walking this journey with you. And I'm grateful to know that I'm not alone. I'm grateful to have you join me and listen and support me. And every time you hit the like and every time you share it and every time you say a comment, it reminds me and everybody else that we are not alone. Grief is something that touches every single one of our lives. And as we as a community come together and say, I see you, I acknowledge your grief, and I'm here to witness it with you, we are doing something amazing, something beautiful. And we're saying, I'm going to walk this grief journey with you. If listening to this sometimes feels heavy and hard, just remember, we also send this out in a written form on a weekly newsletter. And you can sign up on the website for that newsletter. Just go to thewaitingplacefoundation.org and there's a place to sign up. And as you share these things, I hope that you will also feel affirmed and validated and seen and loved and held and all those good things. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back here next Wednesday. Until then, be kind to yourselves, witness your grief, and love those around you.